My name is Margaret. I'm 62 years old, and for more than 2 decades, I've been the one who carried Christmas on my back. Every light, every meal, every memory, they all passed through my hands first. At least, that's how it used to be. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. The family had gathered around my dining table for a simple supper, the kind of midweek meal I usually threw together without fuss. Roast chicken, green beans, rolls still warm from the oven. Nothing special, nothing extravagant. But halfway through the meal, Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, pulled out her little notebook, the one she treated like a holiday command center. She began reading her list with a cheerful authority that made me feel less like a mother and more like hired help. Okay, so Uncle Paul will bring the ham. David can grab the wine. I'll handle dessert. And of course, she barely glanced up, her pen scratching across the page. Of course, Mom, you'll host us all again, like always. But the words hung in the air, so casual, so certain. The others nodded, sipping their drinks, already picturing my house lit up, the turkey roasting, the stockings hung by the fire, their heads turned toward me, waiting for my nod, my usual smile of surrender. For years, that had been my role, to agree without question. But something in me had shifted. Maybe it was the weight of all the unthanked hours. Maybe it was the sting of being taken for granted one too many times. Whatever it was, I didn't feel the old tug of obligation. I felt something else instead, calm, steady, unshakable. I laid my fork down, slowly, deliberately. Every eye at the table followed the small motion. I could feel my heart pounding, but my voice came out smooth. I smiled, but not the smile they expected. Perfect, I said, letting the words settle. Because this year, I'm traveling. You can handle Christmas. The silence that followed was electric. Vanessa's pen froze mid-scribble. David nearly dropped his glass. The children blinked, confused, whispering to each other. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate between ticks. For years they had looked at me and seen a guarantee. But in that moment, as the weight of my words sank into the room, I felt them realize the truth. The guarantee had expired, and for the first time in a very long while, I felt alive. The silence from that dinner lingered in my chest long after the plates were cleared. Driving home that night, I couldn't help but think back to all the Christmases that had led me here. Year after year, I had been the engine, the cook, the cleaner, the planner, the one who made sure joy showed up on time. The first year after my husband passed stands out most sharply. David was still in college then, bringing Vanessa to her very first family holiday. I remember the way everyone patted my arm, saying, "Don't you worry, Margaret, we'll help." They brought a couple bottles of wine, a store-bought cake, and then sank into the couch while I wrestled a 20-pound turkey into the oven. The house filled with laughter and music while I darted back and forth between boiling pots, my apron damp with sweat. Late that night, when the last car finally disappeared down the icy street, I stood alone in the kitchen. The counters were sticky with cider. Pans were stacked high in the sink, and my back ached so badly I could barely stand. The help I'd been promised amounted to empty wine bottles and crumbs ground into the rug. I cried into a dish towel that night, not just from exhaustion, but from the sharp sting of knowing I had been invisible. And still, I carried on. Each December, the guest list grew longer, siblings, in-laws, friends of friends who had nowhere else to go. My grocery bills ballooned, $400 one year, nearly $5 the next. I paid without hesitation, telling myself it was worth it to keep everyone together. The children squealed as they tore open gifts. never knowing Grandma had dipped into her pension to make sure every stocking was full. Tradition became a machine, and I was its operator. I scrubbed baseboards until my knuckles cracked, polished the good glasses until my reflection blurred. On Christmas Eve mornings, I woke before dawn, sliding trays into the oven while the world still slept. By the time the doorbell rang, I was already bone-tired. My smile stretched thin across my face. The little cracks began to show. One year, the oven gave out halfway through the roast. I broke down in tears on the kitchen floor, grease staining my sweater, while in the living room the game blared from the television and no one noticed. Another year, after hours of cleaning, the kids stomped mud across the carpet, and when I gasped, Vanessa just laughed and said, "Relax, they're only children." I kept swallowing those moments, pushing them down with cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie. But each one left a mark, a bruise on the part of me that still longed to be seen, to be thanked, to be cared for. Looking back now, I wonder how I carried it for so long. Maybe I thought love meant endurance. Maybe I believed tradition demanded sacrifice. Or maybe I just didn't know I had a choice until that Tuesday night when I finally heard my own voice say no. The older I grew, the heavier Christmas became. It wasn't just the turkey or the groceries, it was the expectation, the assumption that no matter how tired I was, no matter what else life had thrown at me, I would carry the season on my shoulders. By my late 50s, my back ached constantly from long hours at work, yet come December I was still scrubbing the floors on my knees, stretching to hang garlands, polishing silver until my reflection blurred. David and Vanessa would drop by in the days before Christmas, smiling as though they were checking off a box. "Looks great in here, Mom," David would say, kissing my cheek before heading back to their warm car. Vanessa would add something like, "We should probably think about a bigger tree next year." Neither of them noticed the sweat on my temples, the cracks in my hands from bleach and hot water. The group texts became their own kind of burden. Vanessa would send cheery notes weeks in advance. "Let's do 3 pies this year. Margaret. And maybe more sides? Everyone loved the casserole last time. Thanks in advance. You're the best." Always that line. Thanks in advance. It sounded less like gratitude and more like a command. One Christmas Eve, I found myself collapsed against the kitchen counter. The oven had sputtered and died halfway through the roast, leaving a half-cooked bird in a haze of smoke. The dining room was filled with chatter, glasses clinking, children darting between legs, but no one came when I cried out. I sank to the floor, grease on my sweater, tears burning my cheeks. In that moment, I realized something terrible. I could have dropped dead right there, and they wouldn't have noticed until the plates were empty. Another year. The sink clogged from endless pans, water rising dark with food scraps. I stood there elbow deep, pulling at soggy lumps while Vanessa laughed in the living room, scrolling through her phone. When I asked for help, she waved a dismissive hand. "Don't worry, you've got it. You always do." Her words, meant as reassurance, cut deeper than criticism. She was right. I always did. And that was exactly the problem. I began to see myself as the background of their holiday, a piece of furniture that held everything together but never deserved a place of honor. The more I gave, the less they saw me. The more I worked, the more invisible I became. That realization gnawed at me, quietly but persistently. I could feel my patience thinning, my smiles becoming brittle. I told myself I was too old to keep bending under the weight of other people's comfort. I told myself I deserved one Christmas, just one, that belonged to me. And yet, when December rolled around again, habit would take the wheel. I'd light the candles, drag the tree from the attic, polish the good china, until that Tuesday night When the words finally left my mouth, I wasn't sure I'd ever be brave enough to change. But now, with the decision hanging in the air, I felt the old weight beginning to lift. The morning after that fateful dinner, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to make me anxious, like I should already be peeling potatoes or ironing napkins. But this time, I just sat with my coffee at the kitchen table, staring out at the frost glazing the lawn. For once, I didn't reach for a list. The absence of one felt strange, like walking without a cane after years of leaning. My laptop sat on the counter, closed, waiting. I carried it to the table, my heart racing as though I were about to confess a secret. When I opened the screen, my fingers moved almost on their own, typing words I hadn't even admitted aloud. Christmas cabin rentals near Blue Ridge Mountains. Images flooded the screen, wooden porches dusted with snow, fireplaces glowing amber, windows that looked out onto endless trees. They were nothing like my house, nothing like the chaos of Christmas past. They looked like freedom. I clicked through listings, each one pulling me deeper into a world where I wasn't host, servant, or background decoration. I wasn't anything except myself. Then I found it. A 2-bedroom cabin with a stone fireplace and a porch wrapped like arms around the house. It promised peace and privacy, a sanctuary tucked away from everything. The cost wasn't small, but when I compared it to what I'd been spending on groceries, wine, and gifts every year, it felt almost modest. I hovered over the button, Book Now. My pulse pounding in my ears. What if they found out? What if they were furious? What if they never forgave me? And then another question whispered back. What if they did? I clicked. The confirmation email chimed seconds later, glowing on the screen like a doorway swinging open. I sat there in stunned silence, realizing I had just changed the story of my Christmas. For the first time in more than 20 years, the holiday belonged to me. That afternoon, I drove to the post office. The air was crisp, my breath clouding in front of me as I filled out the little card. Hold mail. House vacant. December 23rd, January 2nd. My hand trembled as I slid it across the counter. The clerk stamped it, barely glancing up, and I almost laughed. How could such an ordinary stamp carry the weight of my liberation? Back home, I opened the closet and stared at the bins of decorations stacked to the ceiling, ornaments, garlands, stockings embroidered with names. I touched them lightly, one by one, and felt something shift. They weren't heirlooms anymore. They were anchors. I closed the closet doors and turned away. That evening, the family group chat lit up again. Vanessa chirped, "Don't forget napkins this year. Margaret, thanks in advance. You're the best." I read it, smiled to myself, and placed the phone face down. They had no idea that this year I wouldn't be their safety net. That night, I packed a small suitcase, thick sweaters, warm socks, a novel, the bottle of wine I'd been saving. As I zipped it shut, the calm settled over me. For once, I wasn't preparing for them. I was preparing for me. Christmas Eve dawned crisp and white at the cabin. Snow sifted gently through the trees, laying a quiet blanket over the earth. I woke to the smell of cedar smoke from the fireplace I'd lit the night before and the stillness of a house that asked nothing of me. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel that old gnawing panic. No lists, no alarms, no turkey thawing in the sink. Just silence, the kind that felt like peace. By late afternoon, I had poured myself a mug of cocoa and curled up by the fire with a novel. That's when my phone buzzed. The first text was from David. "Mom, we're here. Where are you?" I set the phone down. 10 minutes later. "The house is dark. Did you forget the time?" A moment later, Vanessa chimed in. "This isn't funny. Everyone's standing in the driveway." I pictured them shuffling their feet in the cold, expecting the porch light to flick on, expecting me to swing the door open with the smell of roasting turkey spilling out. But this time, the porch was black, the curtains drawn, the kitchen empty. The messages started piling up. "Kids are freezing. What's going on?" Then sharper. "How could you do this? You're being selfish." The phone vibrated so often it rattled against the wooden table. I picked it up once, thumb hovering above the screen. I could have explained, soothed them with apologies, promised to make it up next year. For a heartbeat, the old reflex tugged at me, that urge to keep the peace no matter the cost. But I didn't. I turned the phone face down, pressing the glass against the wood, and let it buzz until the sound stopped. The silence that followed was thick, almost holy. My absence was my answer. Later, I learned what unfolded, the arguments in the driveway, the scramble to squeeze into a relative's small apartment, the undercooked turkey, the air mattresses that deflated by midnight, the children crying, the adults snapping, the laughter that curdled into resentment. But none of that touched me. Instead, I stepped out onto the cabin's porch, the snow crunching under my boots. The forest loomed dark and still, the only light the soft glow spilling from the windows behind me. I tilted my face to the falling snow and breathed deeply. For the first time, Christmas Eve belonged to me. Back inside, I uncorked the bottle of wine I'd been saving. The rich aroma filled the room as I poured a glass and raised it to the fire. "Merry Christmas, Margaret," I whispered. Saying my own name that way, soft, tender, nearly undid me. I hadn't realized how starved I was for my own kindness. That night, I climbed into bed beneath a heavy quilt, the fire dying down to embers. My phone lay silent on the table, unanswered calls glowing in the dark. I turned my back to it, closed my eyes, and let the quiet cradle me. For the first time in more than 20 years, I fell asleep on Christmas Eve at peace. I woke on Christmas morning to a silence that felt sacred. The snow outside the cabin glowed under a pale winter sun, the kind of light that makes the whole world look washed clean. I brewed coffee slowly, savoring the rich smell, and carried the steaming mug onto the porch. The cold bit at my cheeks, but the view stretched endless. Pine trees dusted in white, the sky crisp and blue. For the first time in decades, there was no panic in my chest, no list tugging at me. I was simply here, around noon. The phone rang. I glanced at the screen. David. For a long moment, I considered ignoring it. But something in me wanted to hear his voice, to face what I'd set in motion. I answered. "Mom," he said, his tone already tight. "Do you realize what you've done? The kids were upset. Dinner was a disaster. Vanessa's furious. We were counting on you, and you just vanished." I let him spill his frustration, each word sharp and hurried. In the past, I would have rushed to soften the edges, to apologize, to reassure him I hadn't meant to make things hard. But this time, I simply listened. When he paused for breath, I spoke, steady and clear. "No, David, I didn't leave you stranded. I left you capable. You just never wanted to see it." There was a silence on the other end, a silence heavier than any accusation. Finally, he exhaled, the sound more like defeat than understanding. "It's not the same without you," he muttered. "I know," I said gently, "and that's the point." We stayed on the line for another moment, but there was nothing else to say. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, as though I had placed a stone exactly where it belonged. I spent the rest of the day in small, ordinary joys. I read by the fire until the words blurred on the page. I cooked a simple meal, roasted vegetables and bread still warm from the oven, and washed only 2 dishes afterward. I walked a trail behind the cabin, my boots crunching in the snow, my breath rising in little clouds. Every sound reminded me I was alive, not buried under noise and demands. That night, as I curled beneath the quilt, I realized something. I hadn't lost Christmas. I had reclaimed it. And in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. The year that followed changed me in ways I hadn't expected. At first, I thought my Christmas rebellion would be a single act, a fleeting burst of courage before I slipped back into old patterns. But instead, it became the foundation of something new. It was as if that one decision to step away, to choose myself, had cracked open a door I hadn't realized was there. And once it opened, I couldn't close it again. Spring arrived with yellow daffodils pushing through the soil I finally had time to tend. I knelt in the dirt, hands covered in earth, and felt a joy I hadn't felt in years. Summer followed, and with it came long evenings on the porch, a cool drink in my hand, the sky streaked in orange and violet. I painted my living room a soft blue, a color I had always wanted but never chosen because it didn't fit the family gatherings. For once, the rooms reflected me. I joined a walking group at the local park. At first I felt shy, unsure of how to introduce myself without a title like hostess or grandmother who always cooks. But slowly, I found a rhythm with them, stories shared over trails, laughter rising into the air, a new circle of companionship that expected nothing but my presence. I was learning, step by step, that I didn't have to earn belonging by breaking myself. Still, when December drew near again, I felt the old weight pressing at the edges of my heart. The lights went up on my neighbors' porches, carols played in the stores, and every commercial on television seemed to whisper about family, tradition, and gathering. My hands twitched with old habits, making lists, planning menus, but I stopped myself. The silence of last year's cabin still lived in me, and I wasn't willing to let it go. One evening, while folding laundry, my phone buzzed. David's name lit the screen. His message was short. "So, are you hosting this year?" For a moment, I froze. The old reflex stirred in me like a ghost. Say yes, smooth things over, fall back into the role. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, and I thought of the faces that would brighten with relief if I gave in. But then another memory cut through. The cabin porch under falling snow, the firelight glowing against the walls, the taste of wine I had poured just for myself, and most of all, the peace that had settled in my chest when I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Margaret." I typed one word. No. I set the phone down and felt the stillness bloom around me. There was no rush of guilt, no sting of regret, just calm. The silence on the other end spoke louder than anything David might have written back. The guarantee was gone, and this time it was never coming back. That Christmas Eve, instead of waiting by the window for a driveway full of cars, I joined my walking group for a lantern-lit hike through the trails. The air was sharp with winter, our laughter rising into the night as lanterns swayed ahead like fallen stars. I didn't feel like I was missing something. I felt like I had finally arrived. Later that night, I brewed tea and sat by my own window. Snow drifted quietly across the street, softening the world in white. My porch light glowed steady, not as a beacon for others, but as a reminder for me. It said, "You matter," even when no one is watching. Tradition used to mean sacrifice, silence, and being invisible. Now, tradition could mean something else. It could mean choosing peace. It could mean saying no without apology. It could mean being fully present in my own life. As midnight neared, I raised my cup to the quiet room, steam curling like a blessing. "Merry Christmas," I whispered, and this time the words felt whole, because I hadn't lost my family. What I had found was myself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.